Welcome back to Deep Drive, our weekly podcast powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. Now, on this week's episode, we are going to be talking about EVs. Yes, EVs is a hot topic, but what we are going to be discussing is how EVs have changed the automotive landscape. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
And I'm Sergius Barretto. And yes, absolutely, Hormazd. It's been very interesting. Everyone's talking about EVs. We've been talking about EVs as well for long. It's always been focused on the environment, of course, which is why they came about. But beyond that, we just realized there's so much more that has happened to the auto industry because of EVs, almost like you could say collateral benefits in this case, right? I mean, we've had the rise of startups. EVs have facilitated. We've had platform flexibility coming in thanks to electric powertrains, platforms that were earlier locked into, say, a specific configuration for drivetrains. That's unlocked. So let's go through that. And Hormazd, the first thing I want to maybe start off with is startups.
Absolutely. And I think that's no more evident than in the two-wheeler space, which we will talk about. I mean, Ola, to be honest, it's in a mess right now, and largely due to the promoter who, unfortunately, is someone who can't be trusted anymore with what he says and what he does. But the vision was fantastic.
Right.
And I think, you had a startup which really shook up all the legacy players, shot right to the top, and being the number one EV producer, a complete startup. So it just showed the potential. Of course, it's not an easy game. And that's when legacy players, let's say, caught up. We've got TVS and Bajaj now up ahead, and Ola is dropping. Clearly because they don't have the engineering chops to kind of pull it off.
And Hormazd, besides Ola, there's also Ather and Ultraviolet who have actually done a lot.
Absolutely. I think you're right. How could we miss out on talking about them? Because clearly Ather, really solid the way they've gone about their product development. And they've done it in a very measured way, really keeping the product in mind. And again, it's shown, because at the end, product is king, and they've gone ahead of Ola as well. Right. So I'm a huge fan of Ather. But I think the company that I'm really impressed with is Ultraviolet, Right. I mean, a great bunch of guys. And I've been up close, looking at what they've done. We were involved with their top speed record.
The record, yeah.
I mean, 258 to do. It's no mean feat, because it might just be a number. But the kind of engineering that has to go into making a bike achieve 258 kilometers an hour safely and consistently is just phenomenal. So honestly, that's the F99. It's a technological showcase. It's not really ready for market introduction, but it just shows what Indian startups can do.
Right.
And these guys have just done a phenomenal job, So
all thanks to the EV.
Neeraj Narayan, I mean, there's this great bunch of guys. And, it makes you proud that, Indian startups can kind of really, develop technology like this.
Yeah, and Hormazd, like you said, international brands, there are so many more too. Lucid, there's Rivian, there's Slate. In fact, I really love the Slate auto backed by Amazon. Such a brilliant concept. They've taken like the skateboard and literally reimagined everything. And for a consumer, because technically the concept is you can buy a pickup and tomorrow you could convert it yourself into an SUV with seats at the back. So the load bed is no longer there. The seats in the back, you've got a canopy, a proper SUV. So, it's like a slate. This is clean slate. You can just do whatever you want. So, and all thanks to EVs, with that skateboard architecture.
It just unlocks huge possibilities which simply couldn't have been done earlier. But again, I think with cars also, it's been quite interesting, Sergius. We've had, let's say, some of the Chinese brands like BYD. It's the largest imported EV brand today. They're all imports largely. And clearly, globally also, we've seen random makes which are just were never there earlier. I mean,
phone maker was Xiaomi. Who would have thought a phone maker can make a car?
Exactly. I think Xiaomi is a classic case of how, you don't need to have that kind of automotive engineering legacy, heritage, expertise, and experience to build something fantastic. Right. And, setting a top speed record, just the way their cars are. And I believe they're absolutely phenomenal.
Right. And I think almost at the Munich show, we saw the company Caresoft. I think they said that was the benchmark now. For teardowns, and I think we were both blown away by the quality there. Right?
Exactly, absolutely. It was just amazing, what they're building. And I think, Sergius, I think let's talk about also what it's done to, let's say, the whole ecosystem. I think for one, uh, you know, cars, it's kind of redefined something like acceleration,
Right.
0 to 100.
Right.
It's dropping to under 3 seconds for some
Right.
cars. Let's say even an MG Cyberster,
Right.
which 75 lakh car gives you a 3.2 acceleration
Exactly.
to 100 kph. Of course, top speed is not there. But, these are the few things which really kind of open up a different kind of appeal
Right.
for customers. It's that instant torque, that absolutely, pinned to the back of your seat kind of
all the way,
acceleration. That
unbroken.
clarity. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the other thing that it's unlocked. TVs have unlocked performance. And like you said, on-road, instant acceleration, but also off-road. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of engineers, and also luckily enough, having driven a lot of these upcoming and launched 4x4s. Everyone says that if you're going off-road, an EV actually is the better way to go in terms of performance.
Yeah, because you've got exactly, and all four wheels.
Exactly, all four wheels.
You've got your torque vectoring, which obviously a lot of sports cars use, but over here also you can kind of control the slip with each wheel and maximize and optimize traction.
Exactly, and very quickly. In fact, Hormazd, if you look at an ICE system, an internal combustion system, to intervene in traction, to brake and stuff like that, it's about 90 to 100 milliseconds apparently, very quick. With an EV, it's apparently 5 to 8 milliseconds. So it's almost as it's happening. You can intervene, stop the wheel, put more torque. And every engineer says that's what we want. You don't want the slippage to happen and then a brake intervention. In fact, Land Rover, for their upcoming Range Rover Electric, they say that the brake intervention will be as much as, I think, 60 to 75% less in an electric version, because it's just getting that precise power exactly where it's needed.
And Sergius, then there's water wading capability.
Exactly.
I mean, honestly, do you remember when Dubai had those crazy floods?
Right.
It was the EVs that were going through.
Correct.
And all the big high ice SUVs which was stuck. Because honestly, there's no, let's say there's no water ingestion like there is in an engine.
Exactly.
There's no water to go up the exhaust, no water to come into the intake and cause hydrostatic lock.
No danger exit.
Yeah, and all these EVs or batteries are what they call IP67.
Exactly.
So they are really kind of catered for water wading, and they can be quite deep in water. So it's really a misnomer. I mean, people even think you can get an electric shock if you go into a flooded road, but you can't. And in fact, for the monsoon, there's nothing better than an EV to get you through. I mean, it's amazing.
The G-Wagon, Hormazd, the water wading capability on the electric is a good 100 mm, I think, more, than the ICE version. So there you go. It's like 850 mm on the electric and 700 on the ICE. So,
And I think another thing what electrics have done is they have made driving so much easier than any ICE you can do.
Yes.
For example, I always say a Tata Nexon is a better automatic than an S-Class. Because it's just linear. You just tap it. There are no gears. There's no perceptible shift.
Right.
However imperceptible Mercedes make them.
Right.
So it's just the easiest car to drive, the best automatic by far.
Exactly.
And it's just, I think it just makes driving so much simpler, takes the stress out of it. And I think that's why a lot of people who got into EVs, they are addicted to it. They can't go back to an ICE vehicle. Once you drive an EV in the city, that's what you want.
Exactly. And Hormazd, the other benefit off-road is better gradability. Again, every engineer says that it's a delight for gradability because of the torque.
Yeah.
So you've got crazy angles that you can tackle as against.
My only issue on off-roaders, EV off-roaders, is the weight.
Right.
For me, weight is the biggest enemy of off-roading. Honestly,
carrying a lot of weight,
can get bogged down. I mean, that's why a vehicle like the Jimny is just phenomenal off-road. It hasn't got the power or torque to pull it out of the mud, but then it's so light it can just kind of skip across everything.
Correct.
So I think, for me, the Jimny has shown that, light is really a huge advantage when you're off-roading. So I think this is one disadvantage. They would have. But I think you're right. Overall, the way you can control the slip, the way You can control the traction. Of course, ideal would be to have in-wheel motors. That's a concept in EVs that's not really taken off.
Okay.
Very high unsprung weight and the other challenges as well. But I think imagine having that. You could then really absolutely, really maximize traction and torque.
Yeah, and the one fear for me off-road with an EV, I've always had is the battery being down there and getting maybe punctured or hit. And I put this to the G-Wagon guys when we were doing this off-road, and I said, okay, should we take it? And it's like, there's a huge plate down there. I said, it can take the whole weight off the car. I said, frankly, we've built it to be like a rock slider.
Right.
So you have those rock sliders, you said, just skate over. So I mean, yeah, in a way, they've taken care of that.
Absolutely. I think, battery packs are better protected than we think they are. Obviously, technology has come a long way. That's really a very critical component of the car. And I think it's really encased in probably the best protection, and it acts like a stress member as well. So it adds to the torsional stiffness of the vehicle. So I think really it's a very critical component, which obviously, even from a damage point of view, it's well taken care of.
Hormazd, now moving on to another collateral benefit that EVs have brought in is it's helped legacy manufacturers unlock certain platform restrictions. I mean, we saw that with the Harrier, for example. For a long time, we knew that there was no possibility of them doing a 4x4, or rather too expensive.
Yeah, we had said, in fact, we done a reel on it, why they can't do the 4x4 with an ICE engine.
Right.
The propeller shaft, all that gives a lot of restriction. But now that's all freed up because it's so easy to have a motor in the front, motor at the back, each driving each axle, front and rear axle, and you've got four-wheel drive.
Exactly. No propeller shaft running through, no re-engineering the floors.
Exactly.
Maybe, creating a central tunnel.
Exactly. So I think you're right. I think EVs unlock a lot of possibilities and most importantly, at an affordable cost.
Right.
Because that's the key thing, because don't forget, with combustion, it's very, very expensive. Firstly, there's emissions to take care of, which is the biggest challenge. And clearly, you don't have that issue at all in EVs. And it's not only emissions, then you have CAFE, you have a whole bunch of compliances which you have, which makes it very difficult to do low volume ICE derivatives like a 4x4. And Sergius, another thing is, let's take the case of Tata again. With the Nexon, their biggest weakness, which I think was the engine, became their strength.
Exactly. Pulling it out and with the...
Absolutely. And if you look at it, what's interesting is that a lot of these car makers or the legacy car makers like Tata Motors and let's say Mahindra, the fastest 0 to 100 times are all EVs.
Yes.
At first, so they're doing sub 7-second times and all, which is unheard of for an ICE vehicle to do. So again, from a performance standpoint, we talked about this earlier. Of course, it's that initial kind of acceleration. I mean, we have to say that you can't, drive flat out all the time. The battery discharge is very fast. There can be overheating as well, in which case the power gets cut. So, I mean, we have to say that there are limitations to performance. But for that initial thrill, that initial, let's say kick in your kidneys, your head going back, there's nothing like an EV for whatever brand.
Exactly. And, Hormazd, then moving on to another area or another benefit of EVs beyond environment is it's just reduced the sheer complexity of the engine. I remember, Hormazd, when we were studying in school, we had two textbooks, one for chassis, which was everything. It was about 500 pages. I think Kripal Singh, if I remember the author right. And there was one same thickness only for engines.
Yeah.
Because they're so complex. You've got intake systems, you've got ignition systems, you've got spark advancing, retardation, you've got exhaust to handle, you've got combustion. There's just so much going on in there. That entire engine has been taken out, replaced by something as simple as the motor, which we know is as fundamental as the electric fan motor, right?
It is, absolutely. I think the same source, of course, is there in the software and the electronics and all that, which really starting to make the difference. A completely different world out there. But I think what it has done, EVs, is also kind of level the playing field. I mean, it's made the entry barriers drop dramatically.
Exactly.
So we've seen that in the two-wheeler space, as we said. And clearly, even with vehicles, we've seen what China has done. As I said, brands which, you may not have bought if it was a ICE vehicle, you're open to trying out because it's EV. And I think BYD is one example. It's despite being just only imports, it's had a pretty decent, let's say, demand.
Right.
And I think, if the market opened up to more, let's say, EV makers, I'm sure there would be demand for that. VinFast is another example.
Another example, yeah.
Vietnamese brand, no one really knows. I mean, we still have to see how it fares in the market, early days, but what we've seen, very aggressive pricing for a pretty, straightforward product.
Seemingly capable.
Seemingly capable. And so again, you've got these brands which are really outliers, were never really, not legacy brands, not part of the mainstream, which are coming in.
Absolutely. I mean, thanks to removing all of that complexity. And in fact, Hormazd, if you look at it, another benefit by removing all of the hardware or reducing the amount of hardware, increasing the software, you're also up to date all of the time, right? With
That's
OTA.
what been, Tesla has been just amazing on that. All their cars can be updated with just over-the-air software updates.
Right. Performance.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you've got different things that, talk about changing the landscape. Imagine having a subscription to pay for more performance or less performance.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. You could never have dreamt of that. And I don't know how far people will accept that.
Yeah.
But a lot of things you can do with a subscription.
True.
I mean, you can pay for four-wheel steering or not,
right.
Things like that.
True.
Small things like that, which
because of the software. Yeah.
Because of the software, which you can do. And I think that really is what we're going to see with software-defined vehicles, where, they're all future-proofed, with the heart of the car being, a massive, central processing unit or central computer, which then kind of powers all the different functions of the car, which then all can be updated as well.
True. And, even the powertrain, Hormazd, you can't do that with an internal combustion engine, but over the air, thanks to maybe software tuning. We've seen brands like Hyundai Creta, they've managed to increase the range, 30 kilometers, maybe 50 kilometers here, but you're increasing range. So you're increasing performance. It's not unlocking it, but you're actually increasing it by, maybe clever metering of the power. So I think that's a real benefit that's coming out. Not maybe artificially linked to locking certain things, but they're just seeing incremental benefits. And I think that's really something that, you can look forward to with an EV. You could get a performance boost. Yeah. You could get a unlock in range, stuff like that.
Absolutely. And I think also, Sergius, to kind of talk about what also has changed is that the kind of center of gravity of product development has shifted, or product innovation or product excellence, whatever way you put it, has shifted definitely towards China.
Right.
The more you go into EVs, the more you're dependent on China, because we've seen that they are the masters of the game in this. Yeah. So
in fact, maybe politically that's collateral damage.
Yeah, it is. I mean, given our geopolitics, it's
right.
It's difficult. And in a way, I think Indian OEMs have to thank these geopolitics, because if this market was open to the Chinese, they just swamp it with products that they look. We're talking about JSW looking at Chery products as well. Citroen looking at Stellantis looking at Leaf Motor. So the Chinese are there waiting on the wall, on the Great Wall, ready to pounce if the opportunity is there.
Exactly.
So I think clearly, I think that also is something that is quite a sobering fact, that, going into EVs, it's great. It's definitely democratized it. But in a way, what's happened also is that, Chinese companies are clear leaders, even from a supply chain point of view. All the cells typically come from China, the rare earth magnets, all that which EVs so depend on. So I think by going EVs, you are kind of becoming more dependent on China, which given the current geopolitics between the two countries, isn't a really, makes you a bit vulnerable.
Right. Oddly enough, also, Hormazd, you said they are waiting on the Great Wall. I think Great Wall was the one that did fall over.
Yeah,
they were supposed to come in, had people. But
exactly. Yeah, I mean, Hardeep Brar, who was headed Great Wall, realized nothing happened. And then went Rookie, and now BMW. Clearly, I mean, when you talk to him, that they had big plans, And I think what I think EVs have also done is that while, the batteries are still expensive, overall the costs are really tumbling, and it's coming very close to ICE parity, and sometimes even better. And I think very soon it's going to be deciding whether you want an ICE vehicle or an EV vehicle, depending on what your need is. But I think it's going to really change the face of motoring, the way people look at it. Clearly, because you'll want bigger cars. You're not going to worry about fuel efficiency. You'll want them as big as possible, as powerful as possible. Okay, they may consume a lot more battery juice, but really you don't feel that as much because it's so cheap. So I think a lot of, let's say, mindsets we have are going to change.
Will shift. Hormazd, and you mentioned cost. That reminds me of another sort of benefit going EVs to consumers. Service. You don't have oil changes, coolant change and things like that. Service costs, even frequency can come down. I mean, we are yet maybe in early days with EVs, so we don't really know how that will pan out in terms of at the end when you do have to maybe change a battery.
Right.
Will you lose all of that? But at least in terms of your regular service items,
exactly,
that's reduced.
No, that's reduced. And I think one more thing, Sergius, which you touched upon service. I think one area which you really conserve are brakes.
Right.
Because of regeneration.
Right.
They're not so much load on the brake. In fact, that's Volkswagen with the ID4 had drums at the back.
Right.
Because drums were inherently a little bit more reliable than discs, especially in cold weather and stuff like that.
They don't bind.
Yeah. So, they said we can get away with drums because the regen is there. The regen is so strong, it acts as a brake.
Okay.
So you're really saving on braking as well.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, with that extra torque, that sudden torque, there is increased tire wear. So, I think it's really interesting how, EVs kind of have an impact on different parts of the car compared to ICE vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you're right, Hormazd. The tire wear, yeah, we're seeing that as well with the EVs we run. Brakes, in fact, it's so weird. I remember asking Volkswagen about this thing. Drums, did you all do that for cost as well? He said, no, actually, the weird thing is today to make a drum brake is actually more expensive because of the lower volume. He said, but we want to do that because the brake shoe stays away from the drum, so it doesn't stick because it's not used.
Right.
It's not getting used.
That's right. Absolutely. Not getting used
interesting.
Much,
Very interesting point.
Yeah, exactly. And Sergius, there's one more factor which, after driving an EV, especially a sedan, not an SUV, a sedan, is the low ground clearance, or let me put it away, how ridiculous our speed breakers are.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that every electric sedan I've driven in India has a ground clearance problem. Starting with the EQS,
right?
The i7,
right?
The i5,
right?
The M60, which was really a rocket, but it hit everywhere. And in fact, I mean, here's a bit of a scoop that BMW are planning to launch the long wheelbase version of the 5 Series i5 electric, but they delayed it by a year because they realized there was a ground clearance issue and they had to re-engineer, the suspension and all to raise the ground clearance because it was an issue. So clearly, I think it's not so much the cars because you want the cars to be low. It's better for aerodynamics, which is very, very critical. But the fact is that, people, or let's say the municipalities, just do not follow speed breaker guidelines. And there are guidelines. They just make them ridiculous mountains. I don't know how we can stop this, but I think there's something we should take up. And every EV sedan's underbelly is being hit, causing a lot of damage. And, I think it's a major issue. Obviously, that's why people are gravitating more towards electric SUVs.
Right.
Because otherwise you have a ground clearance problem with a sedan. And when the CLA Mercedes comes, I think that also could be an issue. I don't know what they're going to do. But this is one challenge electric sedans face.
Yeah, so absolutely, Hormazd. It's so interesting to see beyond the environmental benefits, there's so many other benefits that have actually come in or have been plugged in with electric mobility, right?
Exactly. And I think, EVs, we've seen how it's jumped, with more manufacturers launching EVs. Clearly, there's a demand for them. We are seeing so many more green plates. You just constantly see them. They are always there. At one point, it was a rarity, but now it's just so common. Right. So clearly, I think we've seen the penetration go up to about 6% now. I don't know, might not be that much for the whole year, but I think month on month, it's about 6%, which is quite high. So clearly, I think, it's really kind of turned the auto industry on its head in many ways. But even as for a consumer, there are so many more possibilities. There are so many more options. And the way we drive our cars, the way we enjoy our cars has also changed. Well, that's it from us on Deep Drive. Hope you enjoyed watching this episode and hope to have you join us every Saturday at 11 a.m. And to make sure you don't forget to click on the bell icon to be notified. And you can also follow us on our other podcast platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for watching. See you again next week, same time.